Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. We really appreciate it. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about this monumental shift that we're making to distance learning and how it's affecting kids and adults alike. First of all, how might stress be showing up in kids and teenagers right now?
One of the biggest impacts that stress can have is really on our executive function, our ability to pay attention, task shift, focus, and that really has a big impact on learning. And what we know is that when we're feeling stress, the effect of stress hormones actually inhibit the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for executive function, and it can make it harder for kids to focus and sit still and pay attention and learn.
Are there examples of things that parents should be watching for with their kids or their teens right now? Maybe behaviors or acting out or anything that might clue in that maybe they're a little stressed out.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things is that we recognize that there's a lot of stress going on right now. So probably, most kids are experiencing stress, and generally that's pretty normal. But we recognize that stress can have a little bit an outsized impacts on kids. And some of the things that you can look for or pay attention to is, number one, the ability to, focus and attention and those types of things. And it's very common that most kids will have a little bit more trouble with that. But also things like sleep. Sleep can really be disrupted when you have the increased stress hormones that come along with a really stressful time like the one that we're in. And sleep does a double whammy, because if your sleep is disrupted, that can also impact your attention and focus, right? So even though we are, learning from home, doing distance learning, it's still really important to practice the good sleep hygiene, like going to bed at the same time each night and waking up at the same time each morning. Another thing that can be disrupted for kids is their appetite. I think for many of us, we're noticing that it's harder to resist those chips and those cookies. And I think that for kids, it's the same thing, that the stress hormone cortisol can trigger us to crave high sugar, high fat foods. And so that can be one thing that we're noticing is changes in appetite, increased reaching for unhealthy foods. So it's important to have, healthy foods, particularly fresh fruits and veggies. The other thing that we can look for in kids, and especially teenagers, is changes to their mood. They can be more irritable, more, angry outbursts, or just having difficulty regulating their mood, or even increased levels of anxiety around, what's going to happen next, whether it's, looking at their sports or their activities or other things that they're really interested in, or just generalized stress and anxiety about what's happening with the pandemic. And in that case, it's really important, number one, just to provide reassurance, to let kids know that, what they can do to be safe, right? So really be empowering and help them understand that, even though this whole thing kind of stinks, that there are really important things that they can do that really help to keep others safe and keep themselves safe.
I'm glad to know there's a biological reason we're all grabbing for those cookies right now.
Oh, it's real. It is real. Cortisol.
Exactly. And that kind of brings me to my next question, because it's not just the kids who are feeling the stress right now. It's the parents, it's the adults. And a lot of them might be trying to work from home, and you have kids who are trying to learn from home at the same time. They're trying to homeschool our kids for the very first time. So what should adults and parents especially be keeping in mind as they're trying to juggle all of these new tasks that they have?
Yeah. So the thing that I tell parents is that now is a really good time for us to give ourselves a break. And in fact, giving ourselves a break isn't just good for us, it's good for our kids as well. Because the most important ingredient for a healthy child is a healthy parent. Right? And so as we are trying to, yes, deal with all of our work demands and deal with the demands of taking on another full-time job as a homeschool teacher, I think recognizing that and just accepting that we may not have the same level of productivity that we did before that we were trying to juggle more than one job at the same time. Similarly, I think that if we can kind of predict and plan and build in moments into our day that allow us to check in on our kids while we're focused on the tasks of our work. So for example, trying to get things done if you can in like 30-minute increments, right? And giving a little bit of leeway and time, just accepting that this is what it's going to be like and that we need to build in that time to check in with our kids. I think that that's really important.
How is stress impacting learning right now? And I mean, how much, I guess, should we realistically be expecting our kids to be learning when they're kind of in this state of stress?
Yeah. So some of the things that we're seeing is that the impact of stress hormones have an outsized effect on our ability to learn, our ability to focus, pay attention, task shift, right? Even I think as adults, we're noticing that it's a little bit harder to shift from one task to the next and be as productive and focused as we would like to be. And that's real. That's the effect of stress hormones on the brain. And we want to recognize that for kids, it's going to be they're going to be feeling that, and it's going to be perhaps more challenging for them to have the same level of focus and educational success. So a couple of the pieces that we want to do are, number one, supporting, so recognizing this and supporting our kids as they're trying to do distance learning, right? Supporting them with lots of encouragement and reinforcement, but then also making sure that we're building in times during the day for kids to play, right? Because kids process stress through play. And there's an opportunity for us to be playful with what's going on right now, right? And figure out some of our strategies, get a little silly with it around how we as a family can cope with the new normal, which is, being at home and dealing with this pandemic.
What are you seeing in terms of child abuse reports happening in the state right now?
Oh, that is the thing that I really lose sleep over. Because what we're seeing across the state has been a 40 to 50% decline in child maltreatment. And we believe that is not because child maltreatment is going down. We believe that it's likely going up. But because kids are not coming into contact with the safe and stable relationship with adults where child abuse would be reported, right? So with kids being at home, not being at school, not being in their faith communities, not being in their after-school programs, right? They're missing those relationships with all of those caring adults. And so that is a thing where anyone, if you're an educator, if you are a community leader, anyone who works with kids, if you're a music teacher, whatever it is, thinking about some of the kids that may be more vulnerable and reaching out, whether it's just a text message or a phone call, or just checking in to see how they're doing and letting kids know that they still have these touch points and that they can, just checking in to see how they're doing, I think is really important right now.
What about teachers specifically? Because I know a lot of them are holding these Zoom calls, so you can kind of get a little glimpse into how the students look, maybe look at their surroundings. Mm-hmm. What are some things that teachers specifically can do right now to make sure their students are both physically and mentally, sound?
Well, one of the things that we see as a best practice that a lot of educators are doing right now is, in addition to having the distance learning with classrooms, right, to scheduling one-on-one time with students where they can just check in each week and just check in with them, even if it's 5 minutes. How are you doing? What's going on? And just having that touch base and that one-on-one. We see that that's really important for students, for educators to be able to check in on a more personal level with their students.
That's a great suggestion. Do you believe that there's going to be long-term consequences to this crisis?
I think that without a doubt, that's what we're going to see. Unfortunately, the research from other uh, disasters and pandemics show that there can be long-term effects on health, development, and well-being that go honestly into the next generation, right? So what we see is certainly impacts on learning, on productivity, on effectiveness, and even in things like adult earning potential and things like that for young folks who experience something like this. And I think that when we have this data, one of the things that I like to say is that if we can predict, hopefully at least to a partial extent, we can prevent. And I think that a lot of the strategies that we're talking about in terms of doing some of these stress busting interventions, right? Things like the sleep and exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, mental health, and these healthy relationships, reaching out and touching base, all of these things go to mitigate against those long-term harms.
When everybody goes back to school in the fall, and we don't even know what date or when that might be, what should parents and teachers be keeping in mind when they send their students back?
Yeah, so we are all so eager to get back to normal, right? And we would think that when we are back to, going back to school and doing all of that stuff, that it would be nothing but positive. But what we realize is that with any change, it can also come with an increased stress and anxiety. So even something like the long-awaited going back to school and seeing our friends and getting reintegrated back into a more sense of normalcy can also come with heightened stress. And so one of the things that educators should be looking out for is signs of an overactive stress response, difficulty with attention, difficulty with impulse control, but also things like increased headaches and tummy aches, other types of physical manifestations, increased risk of things like asthma and other health conditions. And what we see is that trauma-sensitive and trauma-informed educational practices are really important right now, right? Because we recognize that all of us are going through a really stressful time. And so really brushing up on those trauma-sensitive and trauma-informed practices right now, they've never been more important.
That's a really good point. I think trauma-informed practices have always happened in areas where there's like a lot of gun violence or something like that, maybe more urban areas. And now you're saying this really applies to everybody, no matter where you live. And that should be incorporated in your teaching in some ways.
Yeah, it's interesting. I will say that trauma-informed practices, I think that people see it as being more necessary in low-income communities and communities with a lot of urban violence. But I think that one of the things that we're seeing, even for example, when we see this dramatic decline in the reports of child maltreatment, is that there's trauma and adversity that's happening in all communities all the time. Right? And I think right now we have a heightened awareness of it and a heightened sensitivity to it because we're all feeling the stress of COVID. And for some communities, for some families, that stress rises to the level of trauma depending on how folks are impacted, right? Depending on if you have a parent who has lost a job and now you're really struggling for your livelihood, or depending on if there's family violence at home, or you had a parent or a caregiver who maybe before drank moderately and now with the added stress of COVID now is drinking more, right? Or maybe before had some mental health conditions that was moderately well controlled, and then now with the stress of COVID is being exacerbated. And so we see that what we call these adverse childhood experiences are on the rise. But they've always been there, right? And so now with COVID, we see they're increasing, and therefore it really is a critical time for us to recognize that all communities need to be implementing trauma-sensitive and trauma-informed practices.
What are some very simple, straightforward recommendations that you can provide our families to help reduce that stress overall? What are some things that they can do on a day-to-day basis?
So number one, 30 to 60 minutes of exercise a day, even if it's just an indoor dance party, yoga session, whatever it is. Exercise helps to burn up stress hormones and release healthy hormones that help to combat the effects of stress. Nutrition, as much as possible, staying away from those potato chips and having more foods with omega-3 fatty acids like fish and nuts. Mindfulness, like meditation, downloading, now's a great time to download a meditation app like Headspace or Calm, or there's a whole bunch of them that are out there. And those apps go down to have resources for kids as young as 3 years old. So, even little ones can practice mindfulness, really connecting with our supportive relationships, and whether that's by, FaceTime, Zoom, by phone, even good old fashioned letter writing is, any of the above are really important. And like I mentioned, maintaining our good, healthy sleep habits, and all of those: sleep, exercise, nutrition, mindfulness, and really getting mental health resources if we need it. Now's a great time to reach out. If anyone's in the past or feeling like it now have ever needed mental health services, lots of mental health providers are doing telemedicine now. So and all of these are available in the California Surgeon General's playbook for a stress-busting playbook for addressing stress during COVID-19. That's available at covid19.ca.gov.
Excellent. Thank you. We've talked a lot about stress. Has there been anything in your mind positive to come out of this entire crisis?
Oh, I think that there are always silver linings. And of course, we would never wish for anything like this to happen. But I think that we have a deeper sense now of how connected we all are, right? Which I think can have some positive reverberations. I think there's also a lot of advances in things like technology and ways for us to stay connected, even though we're physically apart. And so we're seeing that, we're seeing some of these technological advances.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.